Funding for Texas Monthly Talks is provided in part by Public Strategies Incorporated, managing campaigns for corporations around the clock, around the world, and J.P. Morgan Chase, the state's largest financial institution, serving large and small businesses, governments, schools, churches, and individual Texans just like you for more than 135 years, and the MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and the Matson McHale Foundation, in support of public television, and also by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, proud to be a founding partner of Texas Monthly Talks, and viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Evan Smith, the editor of Texas Monthly. He is, as the popular description goes, an old person's idea of a young person. Put another way, Ethan Hawke may be only 37, but in Hollywood years, a calculation slightly more forgiving than the one intended for dogs, he ought to be ready for retirement. And he has a career-length resume. His first appearance on the big screen was all the way back in 1985, when he starred alongside another newbie actor named River Phoenix in the forgettable science fiction film Explorers. His first significant role came 3 years later in Dead Poets Society. Cast memorably as one of 7 prep schoolers studying literature and life from a hip English teacher, he established himself as a bankable actor with serious chops. And nothing he's done since, not the futuristic fantasy Gattaca, not the good cop, bad cop thriller Training Day, not the scenery-chewing adaptations Hamlet and Great Expectations, has dimmed his star. An Austin native whose parents met as students at the University of Texas, and whose paternal grandfather served 5 terms in the state legislature, Hawke still feels strong ties to his birthplace, and not just because he remembers fondly the many July 4ths he spent at Willie Nelson's picnic. He's written 2 Texas-flavored novels, The Hottest State and Ash Wednesday, and every chance he gets, he takes a role in one of his pal Rick Linklater's talky Austin indies. At last count, they've done 6 projects together and are at work on a 7th. Indeed, the 2-time Academy Award nominee and Texas Film Hall of Fame inductee was in Austin recently to screen the film version of The Hottest State, which he directed, as a benefit for Linklater's Austin Film Society. And he was in a great mood when he stopped by to talk about his life and work, including his most recent film, the already acclaimed Sidney Lumet heist flick Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. If the adoring throngs mobbed you and hung on your every word in true matinee idol fashion, you'd be in a great mood too. A conversation with Ethan Hawke on this edition of Texas Monthly Talks. Essentially do a version of that. This will be a fun night. Okay. You work that? I got the call. On the one. On PBS. Lewis. And then I shot my show to get back to him, but it's okay. Ethan Hawke, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
It's a welcome back to Texas kind of good to see you, because although many people may know it, some don't, you have a lot of Texas roots.
I do.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because the film and the book that it's based on are semi-autobiographical.
Right.
There's Texas in those books, but
right.
It's your Texas.
Yeah. I've been told that all that matters about being Texan is being a Texan native.
Right.
That's all that matters.
5 minutes is enough.
5 minutes is enough. And I was born here in Austin, and I have a tremendous amount of family who is mostly all around the Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And there's a great line in Larry McMurtry's All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers that I stole this copy. My father had an old copy of it from the Houston Press that I actually stole. And there's a great line at the end of it, which is that if you leave Texas without Texas giving you permission, it will always come back to get you and bring you back. And that line has stayed with me and certainly been true for me, I always wanted to live here.
And you were here till you were 4, just so we're clear about that, right? You left when you were 4?
Yeah, I may have been 1 or 3, or I wasn't real hip. My memories of it aren't terribly clear. but I was here off and on throughout my childhood. My father lived in Fort Worth, and so for me, my mother was always moving around a lot, and I longed to be in Texas. And I hope that my mother doesn't get too offended that I said, but I, like a lot of young boys, I longed to live with my father.
Right.
And so Texas to me meant something else. It meant the place you didn't get to be, the place you longed for. And Texas plays into that mythology incredibly well.
Right.
Because it's the place where, particularly if you're living in Brooklyn, in New York with your mother, Texas is where the men live. You know, where John Wayne is there and Willie is there. And in my mind, Willie and my dad were hanging out at barbecues. And if only my mother would let me go, I could be part of it.
Right.
And ironically, for me, my collaboration with Richard Linklater brought me back here, and it's ended up being the most significant artistic collaboration of my life by far.
Right. Probably the person with whom you've worked the most consistently over your career.
Yeah, not probably, definitely,
Yeah.
and by exponentially. Yeah. Like we said, I'm in the process of making my 7th film with Rick, and that's not including all the films we tried to make.
Right. We only know the stuff that worked.
Yeah, it took us years to get Before Sunset made, and the only reason that movie got, that was a difficult movie to get made. It's nice now because people have responded very positively to it, but before you make these things, oftentimes you don't get a lot of positivity. And so I have been with the Austin Film Society, and for the last 12 years, constantly brought back here.
Well, let's come back to this semi-autobiographical film, The Hottest Day, which is just now out. How much of it is actually your story, and how much of it is embellished or
well, that's the kind of thing. The problem with being me, a lot of people write that falls into that category of semi-autobiographical fiction, whether you're talking about Proust or Jane Austen or Emily Dickinson or James Baldwin or Jack Kerouac or John Steinbeck, or, the list is endless. There's a weird element thrown into it that I think that has made it both easier and harder for me, which is the fact that I'm technically like a celebrity, and that people refer to me and think of me as such. If you're a writer and you're Jane Austen and you write a semi-autobiographical novel, nobody knows where you come from or what you do. So nobody, those lines,
or necessarily cares.
Or cares.
Right.
But I remember the New York Times review of Ash Wednesday referred to one of the characters as my then wife. Said, well, the Uma character. The New York Times did that. It wasn't characters not based on her. It was actually based on the girl I was dating before I met Uma. But so you deal with these things because I believe in using the fabric of your own life to create authenticity for the emotional complexities you want to talk about. It is semi-autobiographical, which is not to say it's a memoir. It's not the truth, and it's really frustrating for my family and friends. Because I use the parts that are convenient for me to use.
Right.
For example, the main character is an actor. Right. So everybody thinks, well, that's obviously based on you. And I guess you could logically jump to that conclusion. I thought it was if you're going to write a book about romantic love, the actor is the perfect character to think of.
Why is that?
Well, because he's playing a role. And the way we all do for each other when we first meet. With this girlfriend, I'm moody and silent. With this one, I am the handyman, because she, or whatever. We take on different personalities a little bit, or different parts of us are highlighted depending on who we're with.
Right.
And particularly when you're 21 and you don't have any sense of self, and you're not sure who you are, I thought, oh wow, the actor is the perfect. If you're going to do a first love story, the actor is a perfect person. In this country, which is wildly celebrity obsessed, that simple metaphor is completely lost. In all the reviews in London, it's mentioned.
They get it.
They get that as Right. Over here, nobody gets that.
Right.
They're like blinded. It's like, but did you sleep with Paris Hilton or didn't you? I want to know. And
Did you?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up.
You opened the door.
I did.
Well,
But it's frustrating for me because I love writing.
Yeah.
And Dead Poets Society came out when I was 18 years old.
right, it's almost 20 years ago.
Almost
it's hard to believe
20
that,
years
yeah.
ago. And the problem is, if all I did was act after that, very few people are doing the same thing they did professionally when they were 18.
No matter
without
what
changing.
profession it is.
No matter what profession. And I needed to do something else.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the long list of actors who are successful at 18, there's a huge casualty list there.
Yeah.
Whether or not the casualty means whether or not they're actually dead, or whether or not they have lost their love, have lost their passion for creativity. And I had to, I felt I had to make a few dangerous moves there to break the glass wall of celebrity.
Right.
People want you to be, like this fabulous person who then, who goes to premieres and drinks champagne and lives this fabulous life. They want to believe that hype. And then you're allowed to commit suicide or, have some terrible drug addiction. And then you're humanized for a brief moment and then put behind the glass wall.
Right.
And I've resisted that. I don't know if this is, I may have spun off into my own.
No, but I
weirdness.
think it's actually because it answers the question that they always ask about you, which is, well, why did he decide to write these novels? Or
Well,
why
if
is he
people-
deciding to
yeah,
direct? Why can't he just act?
Yeah, and if you're, people understand why you do things if they think you're going to make a lot of money doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as it's obvious that you're not just trying to make a buck, they get very suspect.
Right.
Yeah. They want to know, what is his motivation? Like, he wants to be taken seriously, or they project some kind of immediate negative goal on your part. And in a way, it helps me stay sane is to realize that is very fair.
Mm-hmm.
That my books have had an easier time getting published than somebody who's a struggling writer at UT.
Average person shows up with that manuscript, maybe harder to get the publisher.
Much harder, because there's a certain curiosity factor.
Right.
That guy who was in that movie wrote a book.
Right.
Must be terrible. Let me look at it.
Right. They do assume going in it must be terrible. Right.
If I swear, it's so it's just like, look, it's not worth complaining about, but it is. Every positive review of my books or movies starts with, surprisingly. And I always think, what did I do that was so bad?
Right.
You think surprisingly, Lee Harvey Oswald wrote a good book. It's like, well, I am an actor.
Right.
I've worked with some of the greatest writers, alive on the planet, and everybody who writes books or has another job.
Right.
Most actors write. The truth is, they just do it in screenplays. Mm-hmm. And if I had done that, I would have saved myself a lot of hassle.
Well, the one issue, as I say, is people want to know why are you doing this, but then to come back to what we were talking about, the second is, well, he's working out issues in his own life because there are parts of his life.
Because he's so damaged.
Right. There are things in these novels that relate at least partly to his life, so clearly he's working out things in his fiction.
That's a way to say it. The other level to say it is that the purpose of art is communication, and the belief that through communication there can be some kind of healing through mutual understanding. I was in Dead Poets Society and I bought this stuff, hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
Carpe diem.
Yeah.
Hold a mirror as 'twere up to nature. Right. If somebody here were to say, my brother suffers from manic depression. Right. He has these terrible episodes, and it's a real agony for my family, right? A lot of people would be horribly embarrassed. Somebody in their family might say, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that." And what would happen over the course of the next hour is people would say, "Well, my uncle does too, and this is how we dealt with it, and have you tried this doctor, and blah, 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 and this is a very real thing." And this kind of healing takes place, and the person who's, suffering doesn't feel ashamed. Mark Twain said the purpose of art is to alleviate shame. And that the idea of fiction is to take truths, emotional truths, and manipulate them so that they tell a story. For example, I was wildly loved by my family, by both my mother and my father, and I had a wonderful stepmother, a stepfather. I had a wonderful stepfather and have a wonderful stepmother, who have helped raise me my whole life and helped shape me the person that I am. In The Hot Estate, for example, I have the character be, what's the right word? He's estranged from his family. And all I did, that's not true.
Yeah.
I grew up in full contact, knowing I was a loved person. I can't imagine a child receiving much more love than I did. But I still had feelings.
Sure.
And feelings of estrangement and all the issues that young people do. And you take those feelings and you create a story and you kind of weave it to tell a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. Because life doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end.
It's not so neat.
It's not so neat.
Yeah.
But the value of fiction, it's satisfying to hear a story that has a beginning, middle, and end.
Well, that's fair. Now, what I want to know is
That
how
was such a long-winded, boring answer.
No. Well, because people want to know actually what
I
in
don't
this
think
is
they
you
do.
and what.
I think they want to know if, who slept with Paris Hilton.
Well,
but they'll put up with this.
We're gonna come back to that.
Yeah.
How hard was it to direct? This is the second time you've directed, right? You directed Chelsea Walls and now directed this film. How hard was it to direct?
How hard was it to direct? It felt like a very natural extension of everything else I've done.
It did?
Yeah. I part of why I wanted to do this movie was because I could work with two young actors. Mm-hmm. And, I had such positive experiences as a young actor that I thought, I'd be a great director for young actors.
Yeah.
I know how nervous they are. I know what they're going through. I know how insecure they are. I can help them succeed. Yeah. And so that was part of it. I've been on like 20 different directors' film sets.
Right.
And watch, some directors really focus on the production design. Some directors are like allergic to the actors. They're so worried that you're going to mess up their shot list.
Right.
They grew up in advertising and they want the water to catch the light and they want the ring to go by your eye because they're going to rack focus. And as soon as you say, why would I put my hand by my eye? They think, and you've ruined everything.
Yeah.
The point is that I've been exposed to a lot of different directors.
Yeah.
And it was fun to get to pick and choose what I thought was important.
Are you the kind of actor you would want to direct when you're normally acting in somebody else's film? Could you imagine directing yourself? Or are you kind of a pill?
It depends. Yeah. Like, after Dead Poets Society, Peter Weir...
Heck of a director to have at that age, by the way, right?
That's what I mean. I didn't know how high the bar was set. The next 5 or 6 directors that worked with me, I was a punk kid. I was an arrogant little 21-year-old guy going, Peter Weir thinks I'm great and thinks you are a loser. And and I called him last night, and he said that is definitely the wrong way to do the scene.
Yeah.
And, so like I struggled. I vacillated back and forth. I struggle sometimes because I started so young that I can be a real know-it-all. And one of the things I think that we all have to struggle with is like maintaining your curiosity and open-mindedness. That just because you think you know the right way, it's not be the right way.
Right.
This is really on the last directors I worked with were really like, they directed a movie before, but it was really, in many ways, this was their first film. And they didn't know a lot of silly little technical things that they just didn't.
And are you impatient as an actor when you encounter that, or are you understanding now that you've been through this yourself?
Well, I was really impatient.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
Trying to, like, somebody doesn't know where the eye line is, and you do know. But if you tell them, it's kind of obnoxious.
Yep.
But how could I not know? I've been on a film set for, since I was 13.
More than half your life, right?
Yeah. If you were on anywhere, a construction site for 20 years,
you learn stuff.
But you still have to let people, that's what I mean, just little things would be the things that I would be a brat about. But I often wonder that. What's it like to direct Clint Eastwood? Like, whenever he's in a movie, I always think that.
Right.
Does he?
Well, in fact, Clint Eastwood often ends up directing Clint Eastwood because sometimes he's in the film, and of course we haven't talked about this, but you're in The Hottest State.
Yeah.
So you
Small
ultimately,
part.
but you,
Tiny part.
but still, you directed yourself in effect. And how was that?
I did it the last 2 days of the shoot, because by that point the film set can run itself. Everybody kind of knows how you work. And I told the actor who was in the movie with me, Mark Webber, that he could direct me and I would direct him. You know, that we would.
It's a good deal.
Because the problem is you can't act with somebody and think they're judging you. Like I felt I couldn't direct him while I was acting with him.
Right.
It wouldn't be like, oh, don't do that, Evan.
Yeah.
Are you doing that? Stop that. You know, you can't. We needed. I don't know. It's very hard. I don't want to ever do it again. Actually.
So I was going to ask you that. You're done directing now, you think?
It's a temptation for an aspiring director who is a movie actor to be in the movie because it helps it get the movie made.
Right.
I mean, I'm a successful movie actor, and I still, it's really hard to get a movie made. This movie, The Hottest State, is not a commercial film endeavor.
Right.
It's really cinema as self-expression, which was very popular in the 70s and the 60s and stuff like that, and is not that popular now as far as a form. We live in a corporate world where things are commodities. It's a unit of sale. When you meet the people who finance your movie, they talk about it as a unit of sale. How many units will we, and it's...
Although this is a good studio. Think Film is a good studio.
Yeah, they're
distributor, and they're doing good work. The people you work with are doing good work, but they're not expecting you to make $1 million or $100 million on this.
They're interested in cinema. They're interested in something else, but it's not getting it. I'm not coming out on 1,200 screens.
Right.
Which is normal.
Reasonable expectations for a film of this size.
Yeah.
What's Hollywood like right now? What's it like to work in Hollywood?
I haven't been there for 4 years.
Yeah.
I've been to Austin a lot more in the last 4 years.
You live in New York. You don't spend